Hello. So I am not going to talk about platforms or AI today. I did try last night to move some of my content up a little bit, so I know it's quite hard to see some of these slides. So my name is Emily. I'm going to talk about building communities of practice that amplify the flow of learning across organisations. I've seen this GIF today already, but here's his real-time view of the office in 2025. So things have changed a lot since the pandemic. Maybe you've been into an office that's really empty. Have people seen this? A lot of this going on. Or I've been into clients' offices where everyone is quite like looking at a screen on a call with other people who are not in the office. So that's really common. But the way, and even if you are back in the office, the way that we work has changed. Everyone is busier. The way that we connect has changed. And the way that learning and information flow happens has changed. And we don't bump into people in the same way that we used to. So without people connecting, we get silos. We get silos of collaboration, silos of knowledge, things in bubbles, decision-making happening in silos, people in silos, learning in silos, and kind of opportunities that are inconsistent. And when this all sits separately, we really lose the benefits of being in organisations with access to all the wonderful expertise that you have. So we might as well just be all working on our own. So my name is Emily. Hello. I put this picture up because this is the view from my house. So just to make you all jealous, I think. So I am a Londoner, but I live on the Wirral, and this is the view of the sunset. I'm an organisational consultant, and I do a lot of work around communities of practice. And my focus is on creating environments where people can thrive, which in turn means that organisations can thrive. So this is Alex Pentland. And what he talks about is, he's got a book called Social Physics. He's a professor at MIT, and he does a lot of work about how information, knowledge, and ideas flow around organisations through how people are connected to each other. So his book, Social Physics, explores this, and it's a great way to understand how this flow happens or doesn't happen. So he says this: engagement with and learning from others, along with the mutual sharing and vetting of ideas, generate a collective intelligence that's greater than the members' individual intelligence. So we are greater than the sum of our parts when we come together. And he describes it a little bit like this. So this is patterns of success. This is a graph of one person's kind of movement and interaction with people over many days. So he says there's two really important parts to this graph. The first one here is engagement. So these are the people that we talk to on a regular basis, day to day, maybe your team. And then outside of that is exploration. So this is talking to new people, really important for bringing new ideas in and getting you out of a rut, like coming to conferences, for example, or going outside of your team and talking to other people. And he says these are ancient patterns. So you see bees do it, for example, go out into their environment, discover new things and bring them back to your immediate space to create patterns for interaction. He also says when the flow of ideas incorporates a constant stream of outside ideas as well, then the individuals in a group make better decisions than they could on their own. And the great thing is that humans are wired to connect. So we are born without the ability to look after ourselves. Other mammals can get up and feed themselves. We can't. We need to connect with other people that can do that for us for a number of years. And that need doesn't go away our entire life. And we need other people to thrive and grow. However, most organisations are not wired to connect. So does this look familiar? This isn't any one particular organisation, but we have this hierarchical view of how our organisations work and different bits and different silos, and we don't always come out of those bubbles. And what happens when we have this is that teams don't really know what other teams are doing. Information lives in silos. Expertise sits with individuals and doesn't really spread more widely. And learning happens in unconnected pockets. So let's talk about removing the barriers to the flow of learning. Or just watch this GIF for the next 20 minutes. So I've talked about why flow is good and that we don't always have it. So I'm going to talk about removing the barriers to the flow of learning. So for learning to flow, we need three things. We need opportunity, so spaces and situations for people to connect across silos. We need trust, the safety and confidence to share openly, and we need motivation, the conditions where people prioritise learning and sharing. And I'm going to talk through each of these, give you some reasons why they're important, and give you some practical strategies to deal with them. And of course, I'm going to talk about communities of practice. So first up, I'm just going to hold a moment, because it's my favourite animation, that one, I think. So opportunity is about creating spaces and situations for people to connect across silos. And we can also think about it as creating the chances for serendipity to happen, where two ideas kind of come together and something magic happens. So I'm going to give you 3 examples of creating opportunities for learning to flow. So the first one is random coffee. Does anyone do random coffee in their organisations? A few people. So this is where 2 people are paired up randomly to have a conversation, an agendaless meeting, just sit down and have a chat. This Innovate Brew was from the University of Michigan, where they paired people up across different faculties. And what they found is that joining people up that normally didn't talk to each other meant they could gain insights into working in other departments. They realised they faced common issues. They brought new perspectives to problems, and they created ideas for future collaborations and projects took root. I love this quote. It's about giving people permission to talk to strangers, because we're not very good at going and talking to people that we don't know. And building on that, so this is an example from Alex Pentland's book. He talks about a call centre where it made a couple of interventions to see if people spending more time with each other could have any benefits. So at the call centre, this was at Bank of America. At the call centre, people took staggered coffee breaks. So people would go on a coffee break and their calls would still be covered by the rest of the team. So the intervention was to change it so teams took coffee breaks together and other teams could cover their calls. And what they found by changing this break is that people would share, they would solve problems together, they would help each other, they would learn from each other. And they found that average call handling time dropped, and they calculated that to be saving $15 million. And the third example is communities practice. So this is a quote from community of practice member at Xerox. So Xerox had the idea that they could write everything down, everything would be in manuals, and that would be enough for their technicians. But you can only capture certain things. You can only capture kind of explicit knowledge in things like manuals, and it's not really taking account of the tacit knowledge, the stuff that kind of flows people to person. So what this person said is informal stories, tips, and war stories trading during breaks and time off that the service technicians found the most useful. And in concrete terms, they reported a learning curve up to 3 times faster, and it meant that the amount of time logged for each service call was reduced by 10%, just by getting people together and for that learning to flow. So communities of practice, it's an opportunity to join people up who share a practice across an organisation, across silos, functions, departments, locations, etc. And it creates social connections that hold your organisation together and allow information to flow. And they make your organisations more resilient, better at growing, retaining, and knowledge and learning. And this is how I describe them: as a group of people connected by a shared passion for something they practice, who collectively improve as they interact regularly. And a few key points here: they're connected, they have a shared passion, it's something they practice, because it's a community of practice, and they collectively improve, and they interact regularly. So on a regular basis, they get together, get to know each other, and build trust. And there's a few other points to note here: is they're informal, non-hierarchical, voluntary, long-lived, and cross-cutting. So they differ a bit from a team in these aspects. And there are 5 benefits that I like to talk about with communities of practice. Those are that they support people, they give people confidence and motivation to excel, and that underpins everything. If all your community does is create a network of support, that is real value for your organisation. They also bridge knowledge, so they join up people and ideas to reduce gaps and silos. So I once got, 4 product managers together in a room. They all worked in the same building. And just through chatting, they worked out that 3 of them were all working on address lookups. So not uncommon, but just getting them together to talk about that was important. They grow capability, so accelerating learning and raising collective skill. As they mature, they enable collaboration, so people want to create better practices and raise standards and quality, and then scale those approaches, so spreading good practice and creating consistency. And I would always say with a community of practice, when it's quite new, you're more likely to get the things on the left, and as it matures, you start to get more of the stuff on the right. So what do people say? So I often gather quotes from people in communities of practice. So what do they say about opportunities? So these are some that I've worked with. So things like, I'm proud of the collaboration between teams that normally have no interaction, so really creating the opportunity for those people to connect. And the community has broken down barriers between the numerous delivery bodies across our organisation. So that particular one was a kind of overarching organisation that had lots of delivery bodies within it where no one really got the chance to talk to each other. So create opportunities for people to regularly and consistently connect to enable learning to flow. And communities of practice are a great way to do this. There are other ways, but obviously I would always vouch for the community of practice. So on to our second topic, which is trust. So trust is fostering the safety and confidence for people to share openly. So trust is really important, and it can take us time to get to a place where people feel really safe, and safe that they're not going to be judged by what they say and what they ask. So that kind of good psychological safety. And building good connections is a solid foundation for a community of practice that can lead to the flow of learning. And you need to be a little bit deliberate about it as well. You can't just throw 100 people onto a Teams call and expect them to trust each other, for example. So what Margaret Heffernan says about trust is companies don't have ideas, only people do, and what motivates people are the bonds and loyalty and trust they develop between each other. So we care about those trusting relationships because that's what motivates people, and our people are our organisations. However, there's been some changes in the way that we work, particularly since the pandemic, and I was thinking about kind of how to illustrate some of this, and I came up with this list around meeting antisocial patterns. So this is one example of how we have less opportunity to build trust in our organisation. So these are some that I've seen. So stuck in the waiting room, you join a call and you can't speak to anyone because you're just stuck in the waiting room, whereas maybe we used to chat to each other outside that room. Cameras off, anyone been in this meeting? You don't know if anyone's listening, maybe you're not listening, no one's listening, no trust being built. All the faces. You can't have, I've always found this weird because you can't have there's only one conversation that can happen at a time with this whole big group of people. It's like being sat in a room in a big circle where only one person's allowed to talk at any one time. So not good for building trust. Meeting back channels. Have you ever been in a meeting where suddenly two people start kind of sniggering? And they're probably having a little back channel meeting somewhere? And this is one that's super prevalent now, is this back-to-back meeting. So there's no time before and after meetings to chat because people are shooting off to the next one. I run an online meetup that I've been running for 8 years, and people used to turn up before it started. And now they turn up on the dot or just after because it's the only time they've had to go and grab a drink or go to the loo. So this is from a paper called Trust and Tacit Knowledge, Sharing and Use. And it says the levels of risk and uncertainty that are associated with tacit knowledge transfer are reduced by trusting relationships. So we need trust in order to share. And it's a two-way thing. So you need trust in order to share what you know. You need to trust the person you're sharing with, and they need to trust you that you're giving them good information. So it's a two-way thing. And it's really important. And knowledge and learning just flows better around trusted networks. So I'm going to talk about trust in communities of practice through its phases. So this is the maturity model that I use around communities of practice, that they go through these 4 phases of potential, forming, maturing, and self-sustaining. And you don't automatically get everything right at the beginning. So I'll talk about those phases and how to build trust. So the first phase is potential. So community is loose networks of individuals at this stage that hold the potential to become more connected. There may be pockets of connections. And so at this point, you just need to focus on finding enthusiastic founding members. Then we go to forming, where members start to build trust, learn about each other, and align around shared goals and purpose. So at this point, it's important to build good foundations and lasting connections by meeting regularly and sharing stories. One of the first things you can do with a community of practice is get people to share what they're up to, what their concerns are, what their challenges are, and they will start to form connections. The next one is maturing. So community grows membership, commitment, trust, and the value of members' interactions. So focus here on growing the community and its impact, diversifying the things that it does, and finding new ways to connect. And it might be at this point, if the community is getting big, that you also find smaller groups where people can connect more easily. And then self-sustaining, where the community has enough momentum, mutual trust, and shared ownership to keep itself going. So at this point, focus on reflecting and adapting as needed to keep people engaged. I should say this is from the community practice maturity model that you can get on one of my websites, which I'll share the link later on as well. Excuse me. Should have taken the lid off this bottle before. So as the community matures, it can facilitate more learning activities as well. So from less structured things like observation, feedback, sharing, ideas and problem solving, through slightly more structured like deliberate practice learning sessions. John from booking.com was talking specifically about that yesterday. And peer mentoring onto things like schemes of work, courses, pathways, and formal training. So as it matures, you get kind of more ability for learning to be shared and flow. So what community members say about trust? This is one of my favourite pictures, actually, of a community of practice workshop that I ran. They just look so happy. And they were in Warrington. So they say sharing how you feel in a safe environment is invaluable, especially when you're with the people who are best placed to support you with the tricky parts of their job. So really felt supported. And this one, which is we all support each other and any one of us would do what we could to help another member of the community. So this was somebody who was feeling really disconnected from the organisation. And when they had that community around them, they felt much more supported and they stayed around for much longer than they thought they would. So communities of practice can enable the trusting relationships that allow learning to flow. And I would say, if you're a leader and you have a community of practice in your organisation, let them grow organically, let them build that trust, and don't demand that they give you business value, because that will take that all away. So the third thing is motivation. So this is about creating conditions where people prioritise learning and sharing. And I want to talk about, it's a lot about permission and encouragement. People need to feel like they're allowed to learn and share, and they are encouraged to do it as well. So what motivates people to take part in communities and communities of practice? The first thing is that they care about the subject, so it's something they're passionate about, maybe something they practice. The second is that they feel connected, so there's a sense of community, and sense of community includes things like psychological safety, shared history, respect. They feel welcomed, they feel connected to each other and the topic. The third thing is that it meets a personal need. So there can be lots of reasons why people want to connect to a community of practice. Things like support and belonging, learning and growing their career, teaching and influencing others, building visibility in the network, initiating change and influencing outwards. It could be that they just want to understand how the organisation works, so sense making, or it could be about reuse and knowledge sharing. So they're kind of slightly more kind of intrinsic motivations. On the extrinsic motivations side, we have things like they and the community have agency and influence. So they have agency over the community, and the community has influence over the organisation as well. They are actively encouraged to take part. So this is not just lip service. I've seen organisations where leaders say, oh, we really want you to do learning, but why haven't you delivered that thing already? We really want you to take time to do learning, but then they blocked YouTube. Or they cancel your training at the last minute. Has that happened to anyone? Yep. God, at least one hand, I'm sorry about that. So that feels like, we're not really allowed to do it. And added to that is contribution is recognised and rewarded. So people are, maybe that's formally recognised through things like objectives, or they're kind of, people are shouting up and saying it's great that they did stuff. So to that, I'm going to talk about the business case for communities of practice if you need something to share with your leaders. The first is that better connected people are more productive, happier, and will stick around for longer, saving the cost and effort to hire new people. People connected around a passion share knowledge that helps each other, saving time and money by reuse of knowledge and work. Communities of practice accelerate learning for members and build capability for the organisation, saving money on training and hiring. And members of communities of practice will create better practices that improve quality of work, making efficiencies in your organisation. Now, who doesn't want all of that? Of course. And there's lots of examples out there. If you need to give people hard figures, this one is from a products and services to the petroleum and energy industry, Halliburton. They talked about their communities lowering customer dissatisfaction, reducing the cost of poor quality, increasing new product revenue, and improved operational productivity. So what do our community members say? They say, I've learned more from a couple of hours talking to the community than I did in days of reading and researching beforehand. And having kindred spirits to bounce ideas off, discuss concerns or explore new ideas is rejuvenating, and they take their better self to work after our sessions. So people really getting benefit from taking part in those communities of practice. So create a culture where communities of practice are the norm and they have the time, permission and encouragement to flourish. So those three things I've talked about, the flow of learning is amplified when we have opportunities, trust and motivation. And consciously built communities of practice can provide these. I could talk about communities of practice for hours, and I have, but I'm going to give you 8 steps to building a community of practice that accelerate the flow of learning. So share your idea, find your first excited members, start by sharing stories, what you're up to, what your concerns are, what's on your mind. Connect regularly to build trust. Create opportunities to meet, learn, share, and collaborate. Shout about your achievements. Grow your membership reach and impact wider than those first few members. And keep going and turn up the good. Just going to leave that for a second, right? Okay. And I like to finish on my favourite Venn diagram, which is where the magic happens. So you can learn more about communities of practice. A few places that I have. On the left is my fairly new and 5-star rated online self-paced course called Building Successful Communities of Practice. In the middle is my website that brings together writing and various things about communities of practice. There's a bunch of free tools on there as well. That's at communitiesofpractice.work. And then my book, which is 9 years old now, also called Building Successful Communities of Practice, but there's a lot more stuff in the course. One thing I wanted to add, I've got 5 course discount codes. If anyone wants to take the course, those will run out at the end of October, and that is the course URL there and is there, and the QR code is there if you want to get it. But yeah, that is me. I think we've got a bit of time for questions. Fast.
Yes.
Brilliant.